Hi there, Dr. Wilson here, Global Health Chiropractic. I wanted to come to you and share with you a little concept here that every parent's worried about. Like, how do we kick the sick? And when I say kick the sick, let me define what we're talking about. When we're talking about kick the sick, we're literally saying, how do I kick the sickness out of my house in both prevention and when something's gone on? So I want to talk about these two phenomenons because most parents really do have a goal to keep their kids healthy through the winter. What they don't have is strategy. Remember, hope is a bad strategy, meaning we can hope that something won't happen. We can put more little gel things on the backpacks. We can do all those different things, and it doesn't mean our kids are going to be healthier. So, for those parents that send their kids off to daycare, send their kids off to school, and they're worried about it, what we have to understand is the avoidance of bugs working? Is more gel on the backpacks working? I'm not saying that it doesn't help. I'm saying, is it working? In other words, is your kid getting perfect attendance? Or are you worried every time something comes around they get it? If a friend gets it? Are we worried if a kid coughs in church that your kid's going to get it? So if that's been the case because it's also been your history, then there's got to be a better way, and I hope you'll stay to the end. We're going to try to make this relatively short so you can get this, but I want to cover the ABCs of what really happens. So what happens in the immune system when this happens? What happens when we're looking at this? So we have to understand that when we're talking about this idea called immune function, there's really two parts. You have your Th1 and you have your Th2. And these two parts are your immune system. And let me explain those. When God created the body, He gave us two different systems, and these two systems really do make a world of a difference. So let me give you an example. The Th1 is called cell-mediated immunity. What that means is that it's programmed and it's genetically programmed in our system. Now, this is fascinating because when I get something, my body remembers it for a lifetime, especially when it's a virus. My body remembers it, and it remembers how to kill it. It remembers what it needs to do. It remembers exactly how it needs to defend itself. So, but I have to get the illness for my body to genetically remember. Now, when this happens in this system, it programs the killer T cells up to 5 generations, which means you're carrying genetic history of 5 generations of what your ancestors have ever been ill with. Now that's fascinating that God designed our body to carry 5 generations of genetic history of what your body's been exposed to. Now, the other part is called antigen antibody. It's the lock and key. Remember in 7th grade, you talk about the lock and key part of this? So what that means is in our immune system, as our body goes through this process, if I'm out walking in the brush and I get poked by a thorn, right? And that thorn has maybe some bug poop on it. The bug poop's got some bacteria. The bacteria goes in my system. My body senses that, alarms it, creates a redness, brings blood flow, begins to create an antigen antibody because it doesn't know where it's gone, doesn't know where it's flowed in the bloodstream because it's had a different access point than my immune system. See, my tonsils and my adenoids and my sinuses are on high alert when I get something. Why? Because it's telling the rest of the body to do something. It's actually the first defense, and when it goes through a first, second, and third defense, it programs the body. When something goes through my skin, it's not necessarily a third response, and it won't remember it. It'll remember it for a short period of time, but it will only remember it for a short period of time because maybe that's just the area that I'm in. So if I'm in West Texas, then I've been poked by a few sticks. I probably have awareness of those microbes in this area. If I'm in Africa or I'm in some other area of the world that maybe different illnesses are condensed, such as malaria, where it could come through my skin through a mosquito that's not necessarily a problem here in the States, then there's a chance that my body could be exposed to something. Now, most of the time, it's not deathly. It's just something that my body would have to learn. And once it learns it once, it would know it from there, which is why they can live there and keep getting stung by the same things, and they don't have the reactions that we would have when it's our first time, right? And so obviously there's some malnutrition, there's some build an immune system, there's some things like that that go on with this. But if there are people who've had that, who have great immune systems, who live there on a regular basis, but they're used to it because it's something local to their environment. So God gave us these two pieces of their immune system that's constantly working to make a navigational sense of this. Now, here's how we've used those systems. Number one is most parents understand that if you let your kids get sick, then your body knows how to develop, it knows how to fight, it knows how to do those things as it moves forward. If you get something, you tend to be healthier after the fact. It does stink when you do it. Nobody likes to see our little tykes having a tough day. Nobody likes to see them with fever. Nobody likes to see those things. But however, in that process, our body does know how to deal with it. It's armed with an immune system that's carried up to 5 generations of genetic history. If my body cannot fight an illness and everything that comes my way I get, that means you have a weak immune system. So the question is how do I boost the immune system? Not how do I avoid it? That's the number one question most parents ask. Not a bad question, just not a very effective question. Because if they're going to go to school, can't avoid it. You're going to go to daycare, can't avoid it. You're going to go to church groups, can't avoid it. These little snotty-nosed kids are sharing this. It's actually part of the design, meaning as we do it, we get better, but we like to try to control that. And we like to think we can control how well I can avoid things, which is part of it, or how much I can smear on my skin, how much I can do whatever to try to avoid this. The reality is, there's no avoidance. You can help, it's just there's no absolute avoidance, okay? So, how do we do it? What about if I focused on how to build an immune system? Meaning, there's always been this thing, like, how do I, instead of trying to prepare this human to live in this world, this crazy environment, how to try to prepare the environment for my crazy human to live in it, how about if I try to prepare the human to live in this environment? What can I do to boost my immune system? Well, I think that's what's so amazing, is that chiropractic boosts the immune system. We see a 200 to 400% boost by Dr. Perro's research on adjustments on a regular basis. Now, parents, let me explain this. If you're a patient in the office, you need to understand this. Regular means at least twice a month. That's regular adjustments. Not popping in only when I get the sickness. That's what struggles, and I'm just going to get on to you parents for a little bit, because when we see a kid only when they're sick, they're going to hate chiropractic down the road, because the only thing they know it for is when it's hurting and when they're stiff. It's like when we get the flu, what do we feel like? We feel like poop, and we get sore and we're aching. If that's the only time a kid experiences an adjustment, it's going to ruin their appreciation for the wellness aspect of care. So let's make sure that we boost on a regular basis, even before we get sick, before we've been exposed, so that my immunity can raise, so when something walks into my system, it feels and functions better. Not that when the illness is here and the body's here, that I've got to try to boost through this problem. Sure, that's where we start a lot of cases, but we don't want to end our cases. That's not where we want all of our patients to be. We want you to stay boosted, stay on a regular schedule, stay on that wellness path, so they can stay adjust on that. So for those of you listening out there, stay on that wellness path. So let's give you a couple examples. Okay, what happens with strep? What happens with a virus goes in my throat? Like a lot of times, people have gone to doctors, they've looked, and they've swabbed. It looks like strep, acts like strep, feels like strep, but it's not strep. That's a virus. Okay, so let's think about this. A virus looks and is shaped like a protein. Gets into a cell begins to replicate it. The immune system recognizes that. So imagine you go to bed, you get a little thumping in your throat, right? You wake up the next morning, your throat's totally raw. What happened? What happened? Your body recognized these rogue cells, and it's producing this wrong protein, i.e. virus, and it's beginning to replicate in the body. So what does it do? The body's flipping amazing. And what it does, it begins to gas those areas out. It literally cuts them out like a laser. When it's not keeping up with it, that's why sometimes you go to bed with a little, you wake up and you're fine. Your lymph gland's a little swollen, you feel a little something, maybe a tiny bit of rawness, but you're fine. What happened? Your body won. It beat the illness. You literally got exposed to something in the air, your body beat it, you went on down the road, you never even knew you dealt with it. You maybe had a little scratchy throat for a couple of days. Sometimes we wake up, our whole voice has gone. Our throat's totally raw. We can't speak, we can't eat. What happened? The virus was replicating at such a pace, the body sees it, literally gases all the cells, because in a virus, the cell mediated has to be able to kill the cell to kill the virus, or kill the bug. So it literally has the ability to kill the cell, which is what it does. It wipes out that whole section of cells, and then what? It brings fluid and cells and all that stuff to get what? The dead cells out. So I get a bunch of mucus that does it, and then what happens? The body doesn't know where it went. So what if it got away? And so it sends a fever. And the fever then is something viruses hate to live at 104 degrees. They hate it. They can't. In fact, that's one of the ways a virus dies, is by heat. But guess where it loves to live? 98.6. Now that's what's happening in the body. So when somebody comes in and says, oh, I'm not feeling good, oh, I've got a scratchy throat, then we're like, yes, that means your body's winning. So let's help it win better. Let's go into work. Let's boost the system. Let's add an extra adjustment. Let's throw some nutrition in it. Let's throw some colloidal silver. Let's begin to do something to help the body win this battle versus throw my hands up in the air and go, oh my gosh, I better run get a medication because my body must be out, because that's the answer. When the reality of it is, you have to, for those who follow the studies, there is no medication for a virus. But if you go, they swab, it's not going to be done for 4 days, they still give you one, don't they? And the reality of it is that's what affects so many people's guts. That's why so many times kids get it. By the time we see some kids, and many times in our office, we're seeing kids that have been on 12 rounds of antibiotics in the first 6 to 8 months of life. And so their guts are totally rocked, they're totally destroyed, and parents are wondering what happened because they've been on antibiotic, off antibiotic, on antibiotic, off antibiotic, and if it was an antibiotic problem, it would have been resolved. But many times it's not. It's an immune system problem, and we need to boost the immune system, but the immune system has a block, and we call that a subluxation. When there's an interference in the body, the brain-body connection, where the brain to body cannot communicate, cannot mount a correct response in that first 4 cervical vertebrae, mostly caused by birth trauma, right? So if you haven't been to one of our baby bumps class, then you should probably attend one of those, mostly done by that, and it's been left there, and the child's sick, running nose, and so forth. So when that Th1 drops and the Th2 is driven up, because guess what happens? Guess what else is injected into my system? Not just fly poop on a stick, right? That's not it. But medicine learned how to use this antigen antibody response. They call it vaccines. And so kids now aren't just given a handful of vaccines, they're given 40 to 50 vaccines in their first 2 years of life. So what happens is you get this skyrocket in the Th2 response, and this drop in the Th1, and this gap is called reaction. That's why you see so many kids with a terrible running nose, terrible sickness, terrible immune systems, because they've been given so much and the system's been driven so hard off, basically birthing the formula for an autoimmune disease. And many times, kids are highly reactive to everything in that stage as well. So instead of trying to bring this down, what we're trying to do in our world is bring this side up. So we can bring the Th1 up with regular chiropractic adjustments. We see this. And listen, there's blood work we could do. It would cost about $1,600 a person. And there's all kinds of things we can do. Most parents just want the results. They come in, and our office is full of these testimonies, full of these stories, full of parents who've gotten well. And that's what's so amazing, is that there's still people out there that have no idea what we do. So which is why we're making this video for you. So that's how strep is. So guess what? So there's 2 options that we have. When my body gets sick, I can run and try to just numb this stuff. Now guess what we've been trained to do? We've been trained to do what? I get sick, I feel bad, I coat it, I just don't want to feel it. Then what happens? I get mucus, so what do? I take something to dry the mucus up. Why would I want to dry the mucus up? I need to get this stuff out of my body. Now I get a fever. Well, I want to kill the fever because fevers are bad. Are fevers really bad? The inability to mount a fever is bad. Fever is not bad. Fever is a response to something that's good, which is your body kicking the crap out of a virus. But the thing of it is, we've been programmed that fevers are bad. But yet the Tylenol PR manual says that a fever can get to 105.7 with no neurological damage. But nobody reads that little piece of paper in those things. The reality of it is that for me personally, I've always managed it up to 104, and then I've done something to kind of do it, but I don't want to kill the fever. There are studies that show when I kill the fever, I prolong the life of the virus 3.5 days, which only makes sense. If the fever is an agent that kills the virus, right? And think back to grandma days. Grandma would wrap you up in a blanket, sweat your tail off, give you some whiskey, and tell you to go to bed. That's how she did it, because she wanted you to burn the infection off, right? But now in our world there's these pharmaceuticals that want you to go buy everything on the shelf so that your child can feel better. We've got addicted to this idea of feeling better but not functioning better. So I want you to think about how to create function in your child so that they will always feel good. And so when you don't worry when they go find something, or they don't worry if they lick a stick, or they don't worry if they got exposed to something in the daycare, you don't worry about it, because why? They have a strong immune system. So that's where I want you to focus. Same thing as with the flu. Okay, flu's around the corner, and I'll tell you this. 60% of people who get the flu vaccine get the flu. Just look at the stats. I mean, look at it. They do. The reality of it is they don't even hit the same strains. They don't do it. There's just not a lot of proof that they work. But they're built on fear that they can control this illness. And the reality of it is, I don't know that you can. What I do know is you can boost your body. We can begin to work now to boost your body for flu season. Does it mean you're not there? I can tell you this. In our practice, we have a handful of people get it. And guess what? I have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of people who come in here with it. Sure, we clean the table. Sure, we take measures. Sure, we do the stuff. Sure, we do it. But the reality of it is our whole office gets exposed. But guess what? How many of us miss out from that? Not many, because we've already seen the strains over all the years. And because the body remembers, because I've let my body over time get exposed to it naturally and not artificially. Think about it, folks. Artificial or natural? Do you want to eat artificial chicken or natural chicken? Do you want to eat artificial beef or natural chicken? Do you want to eat artificial vegetables or real vegetables? Like, which one is it? But the reality of it is, do you want to build real natural immunity or do you want artificial immunity? And the thing of it is the thing that people have been offered up to this point is only artificial immunity. So I'm challenging you to make sure that this fall and winter, that your family has the opportunity to build a strong natural immunity so that when we need medicine, crisis, trauma, and emergency situations, when we need it, it's going to be as strong as possible. But we don't use it until we need it. We don't use it as a first line defense, right? It's one of those things where we begin to understand what my body's doing so that I can understand how to beat it. The barometrics are about to change. What's going to happen is we're going to see more and more, the offices are going to be loaded up with ear infections. And I can tell you what happens with ear infections. Is the eustachian tube driven by cranial nerves, which is the occiput, doesn't work well in a lot of kids. When those barometrics drop, the ears fill with fluid and they end up going. They get on antibiotic, off an antibiotic, on an antibiotic, off an antibiotic. Nothing in any level of science says fluid does anything with antibiotics. Nothing. And when I go on antibiotic and off an antibiotic, on antibiotic and off an antibiotic, I'm still left with fluid, then now all of a sudden the genius idea is to poke a hole in a system that's supposed to remain closed. I want to describe this to you. You have a tube with two guards on each end that's driven by two different nerves, two different systems, full on immune. It's never supposed to be an open system, always supposed to be a closed system. Two valves only letting small amounts of things in and out. But when that system is not functioning properly and it builds up pressure, we now want to poke a hole in the outside of it, totally destroying this closed content thing, and think that's the idea to the answers. When the reality of it is, what we can do is get the nerves right, get the system working right, get the brain body connected, and boost that immune system. And so many kids will never have to have tubes and never have to have surgery. Now that, to me, is success. So this winter, this fall, if you know somebody, you share this video, you tag them. I want you to be a part of this. This wants to be one of the hottest webinars because this is honestly a problem in our country today. It's a problem in our city, and we want to stand in the middle of that and help families get through this. So thanks for sharing, thanks for tagging, thanks for listening to this. I know I sound a little bit ranty, but gosh dogs, the science supports this, and there's so many kids that are ill out there, and we want to make sure and get in front of this, and we want to kick the sick not only proactively, but also when they have something going on. So share this. Thanks for listening. This is Dr. Tracy Wilson from Global Health Chiropractic. Talk to you soon.